Welcome to Survive and Thrive, DW Akademie's dialogue with media managers on innovative and sustainable business models in a challenging global media landscape. We'll talk motivation, lessons learned, funding models, decisions both good and bad, and recipes for success.
I'm Janelle Dumalaon, business news anchor at DW and your Media Viability Podcast host. Let's begin. At this stage, I'd like to welcome Iryna Vidanava, founder and CEO of CityDog. Hi, Iryna.
Hello.
Now, before we hear more about you and CityDog, I thought we'd start with a short burst of questions. So let's go. What's your business model in a catchphrase?
The business model is based on the notion of native advertising. Native advertising has different definitions, but for us it was the sponsored content created by the editorial team of CityDog, but paid by a partner, be it a private company or an NGO, so it can be different partners. And it's usually longer-term projects for 3 to 9 months based on certain topic, but what's important that the project itself must be of interest and offer value to our audience.
Next question. Did you ever manage a moment when everything seemed lost?
Many times throughout these 10 years, from the beginning when nobody believed that it was possible to run an independent magazine in Belarus and commercially sustainable and successful, to the very last year when we had to relocate from Belarus because of the repressions, and still we are going.
What would you need to thrive in the future?
To believe in what you do, to believe that your magazine or your publication, your media matters to you and to your audience, and to keep pushing, keep going.
Now, as we've said, today we're talking about CityDog, a media website that's blocked and censored in Belarus. But instead of closing down, Iryna found a business model which has allowed her to continue working. So Iryna, tell us about CityDog. Who is it that you're trying to reach and with what?
Well, originally, CityDog, which was launched in 2012 in Minsk, was the only and the first digital Minsk city magazine. So we were capturing the moment when Minsk was changing from its post-Soviet past to becoming a really thriving European city, yet based in a dictatorship. So we were trying to highlight all types of civic and urban activism, to bring together different groups of people from different fields of activities, be it business, civil society, media, culture, and becoming a platform where people would be discussing the future of their city, the present, and transforming it together. So that was the story of CityDog. We thought of ourselves as a niche magazine initially. Then we grew over 1 million visitors per month, which was way higher than I ever dreamed of. And then we started expanding our vision and mission, but still being at the core, being the magazine which is embedded in the society. And here's the name, CityDog, running around the city, sniffing out different uncommon news. We were not a news media, we were really storytelling media outlet. And then the 2020 came, where there were last presidential elections in Belarus, of course, fraud, followed by mass protests, as you might remember, and of course, with a crackdown on the media were the front line, and the one of the first hits was against the media. We continued working inside of the country as long as we could. The idea was that we wanted to stay with our audience, next to it, with it in the struggle, but yet because hundreds of websites were blocked, dozens of journalists and media professionals were put in prison, sentenced to dozens of years in prison now. And because it was impossible to carry on our mission and not to compromise on it, we decided to relocate. And so now we are the magazine about Minsk, Belarus, and Belarusians everywhere.
Now, perhaps for our listeners who are just learning about Belarus, why is the media landscape in Belarus so repressive?
Well, because the media were the mobilizing force behind all the protests and peaceful demonstrations in 2020 and and long time before, because media are also powerful in organizing people and opening eyes to certain things which the government wants to hide. So it's no wonder that media become often one of the first targets for the authoritarian or dictators.
Now, you yourself have been targeted. What you've already said that you've had to relocate. What else has that meant for your outlet?
Well, it meant that before we were nicely located in one city, targeting young professionals, creative class of Minsk. We knew all the places our readers would go and see. We were part of the same community, so our audience was actually very, very united and clear and understandable for us and for the audience as well. And now when hundreds of thousands of Belarusians fled the country because of the repressions, our audience also distributed across different countries. So now it's not just some young person sitting in Minsk. Most likely it might be a young woman somewhere in Poland, Lithuania, Georgia, or somewhere else in the world. So of course we also had to change our look and understanding of our target audience, but remain true to our core mission. And the core mission would be still to build a community of active Minskers and active Belarusians. If before we were focusing more on how to develop our city in a nicer place, now we have to focus on how do we rebuild our country, how we imagine the future for it when everything looks so grim, especially with the war in Ukraine and continuous repressions in Belarus itself.
Is it fair to describe you as a media outlet in exile for exiles?
No, I wouldn't. And I think it's important not to put us in this basket. We describe ourselves as a Belarusian media abroad. But also what's important that not a single independent media in Belarus stopped publishing despite the repression since 2020. We relocated, but we continue working with the audiences inside of the country as well as outside of the country with the notion that one day we will come back. There are still some independent media outlets, mostly local ones, inside of the country, and therefore it's important for us as a media sector, as an independent media sector, to view ourselves as a single media sector of Belarusian independent medias inside of the country and abroad. But of course, when you're based not in your own country, you have to understand when you're blocked in your own country, then you have also to diversify the channels of how to distribute your content to people in different locations, especially if the website as your anchor is not so easily accessible.
Now, I would like to take you up on that point. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about your business model and your strategy and how you're surviving under these obviously very difficult circumstances.
Well, of course, the business model as it worked in Belarus doesn't work anymore. As I said, it's based on, it used to be based on native advertising partnerships. And of course, most of our partners were also Belarusian or international companies based in Belarus. So I don't think that media, independent media, or any kind of media in Belarus can be viewed as businesses now. It's a mission. So the business model switched to non-commercial funding, let's put it this way. But the model of the media also changed because before 2022, of course, CityDog was present on all and popular on social media as well. But still, we saw ourselves as a web-based magazine. So the website was the platform or the place where we wanted to drive the audience from other different locations. But now, when the website is blocked inside of the country, and of course also pessimized by the search engines and everything, then what do you do? So about a year ago, we started this transition from being the web first to being multi-platform media. And by saying that, I mean that it's not that we just distribute our content created for the web through other platforms, that we think of the content at the creation stage as of how it can be told as a self-sustainable story on the specific platform, so that it's native in its format for Instagram, for example, or for Facebook, or for TikTok, and for the website. So it actually changed the whole mindset of the editorial team, because before we would imagine the story for our reader, for the website, and then think afterwards, how do we repackage it for other social media? Now, when we are brainstorming the stories, we are already thinking how the story can be told on Instagram, understanding that most likely our user, our follower on Instagram will never get to the website. And that actually helped us to grow the audience tremendously and actually change the way how we think about ourselves as a media.
How does your audience find you? Is it easier to find newer audiences that weren't already following your publication before?
For us, the goal was not so much to find new audiences, because we were already quite a big media brand for the target audience we defined. It was how to regather, recapture, and unite those audiences with the same mission, vision, and brand that we had, because the audience became very fragmented. So now what we were doing over the last year, we were building the CityDog media brand across different platforms. So no matter where you saw our story, you knew it was CityDog. And my goal as a leader of this organization would be to hear from you, I've seen it on CityDog, and it doesn't matter whether you've seen it on TikTok, on Instagram, or on the website. And I think we are getting there.
Now, you've talked quite a lot about distribution now, but I have to imagine that it's quite difficult to sustain these operations. How are you financing? How is everyone getting paid? How are you surviving as an organization?
Well, today it's thanks to the international assistance. Wouldn't be possible otherwise. As I said, business is not possible in Belarus. We're still generating some revenues through display ads and some occasional native advertising projects. And I think after this crisis management year, we are now again in the strategic mode and growth mode. And I hope that the next step will be also rediscovering various ways of monetization, looking more specifically of how we can do what we were doing in Belarus as a native advertising model on the web, how we can also maybe do it using our social media platforms. But this will be the next stop, as our original business model was disrupted. But this tremendous crisis. But again, I see potential in it and how it can be reshaped for the new setting we are in.
Now, you've spoken of a crisis management year. You were cut off from your audiences. You had to find alternative ways to get your content in front of the eyes that you wanted in front of your content. Are you going to be facing further challenges in terms of your publication, in terms of what you want to do?
I'm sure, because the repressions never stopped. We still have people inside of the country undercover. That's why you won't find any names on CityDog, and it's a pity, because we are proud of what we are doing. Our authors are proud of their work. Our readers would love to know the names, and sometimes they can guess from social media who is doing what, but we can't put the names on the website not to put them at risk. So the blocking of the website is one of the possibilities, but many dozens of media in Belarus were also labeled as extremist or extremist formations just for doing their media work, nothing else. And if your media outlet is labeled as an extremist, then for the reader, for the user, it's a criminal offense. Not only read it, but especially share or like it, and then users and readers go to prisons. So you have to keep in mind that you are really trying to do something important, but you also have to understand that there might be consequences, not only for the team, for the media team, but also for the readers. And you have to really think about it when you're producing the content.
With all that in mind, Iryna, how have these restrictions changed the content that you're trying to produce?
Well, when we were based in Belarus, we really had to be very careful, and that at some point made it, for me personally, very hard to motivate myself to keep doing it, because I felt that we couldn't fulfill our mission. I will just give you a very concrete example of we were highlighting, featuring a lot different kind of civic activists, not necessarily the organizations, but because that's what people, it's more interesting for the audience when you show the people doing something interesting and then you mention the organization or initiative. But over the last couple of years, literally hundreds, if not 1,000 of NGOs, non-government organizations, were officially closed down by the government, many of them also labeled extremist. So what we were doing naturally for 10 years, we couldn't do anymore, because by spotlighting those initiatives, we would send these people to prison. And so for me, that was really one of the toughest moments, which lasted for months, when I couldn't do what we were meant to be doing, why we were created as a magazine. So now we are back to featuring those initiatives. There are many of them now popping up in different countries. And again, this civic movement and civic activism is highlighted in the magazine. And as I said in the beginning, if before we were basically Minsk-oriented magazine, we are now seeing ourselves as a platform which unites Belarusians everywhere, that we keep those ties and solidarity which appeared in 2020, that we together look and think about the future of the country, that we don't give up. And therefore, CityDog still remains a very positive media. We are not naive. We understand that things are really bad. We do write a lot about political prisoners and their families and how to help. But at the same time, we want to give our readers a sense of normality, because life goes on in all the different aspects. And we also want to inspire them to do something and not just to feel a victim of the circumstances. And that's a big task, and it's a challenge. But I think that it's important to keep doing it.
I can also imagine that you have to motivate your team a lot, and that you have to do a lot to reassure them that they will be protected, that they will be secure. How do you protect the journalists working under you?
Well, I'm very lucky with having a very motivated team. Nobody left since 2020. The team actually is very horizontal. We are 4 co-founders and we are equals. So it's a very democratic structure. And we've been the co-founders, the 3 of us. It's our 3rd media outlet. So we've been doing it for 20 years since we were students in a country which was never media friendly. So we are kind of tough enough to understand that this period of time will end as well. And then, of course, it is our responsibility as to be very honest with the team and explain the risks and understand that people might get burned out at some point. We also have security protocols. We had prepared security protocols for different scenarios by August 2020. We knew that there might be, nobody couldn't imagine the extent of brutality, but we were more or less prepared for what might happen, and we had protocols of how to act, and we talked with the team about that. And then again, we have to be honest, and people should understand that as much as I will do everything to protect my people, I cannot guarantee the safety. I cannot guarantee that their families will not be affected. And I think that in this part, you really have to be honest. And finally, we are doing now psychological support. I know that it's kind of a new thing, but in the media field, we start to realize that this is very much necessary, because the work is so stressful for us, even more in the circumstances. And so this is kind of therapy which also is in place and should be there.
Are you ever personally afraid?
Of course I was. I mean, I was participating in demonstrations since I was a student in the late 90s. The 2020 wasn't the first time when people were beaten in Belarus and arrested. It was just the scale that opened the eyes for the world and what was happening there in the center of Europe. And every time when you are part of the peaceful demonstration for the right cause and you are a journalist, likely with a microphone, or even not, but you know that you will be among the first targets. Of course you are scared. It's normal. But then you feel the shoulder of others. And in Belarus, often the shoulder will be another woman and not a big one like myself. And then you do feel this empowerment, and you just have to overcome this moment of fear. But of course, I'm also scared and afraid for the people who are in the country, for my family, and I understand that there are no limits to this regime. But again, if we give up, then it will be up to the next generations to clear the mess. So we have to do it.
So this is a bit of a philosophical question, but your job as a media practitioner working under repression is not going to be the same as a journalist who enjoys freer conditions. Would you say that journalism under repressive conditions necessarily has to have an activist quality to it?
Not necessarily. I think it really very much depends on the media outlet. My media does have this activist position. I think in Belarus, most of the independent media would have to take this stand. But then if you are a news media outlet, you do have your job as a reporter. You are just reporting. You're not taking sides. So I think that what's nice about media sector, media industry these days is that it's very diverse. So you can find all types of media with different angles to them. So for a non-news media, it's absolutely normal to be focusing on the storytelling, on featuring, on evergreen content, and we do a lot of that, and not just reporting. So still, having said so, you have to be balanced, you have to fact check, and you have to be very vigorous, even more if you're in this kind of activist media position, because you have to be able to prove that what you're doing is real and not just some imaginary reality.
Can you take us through an example of a story that you would do and how you would distribute it according to which part of the story belongs to which platform?
Yeah, well, just one recent example. We did a long read for the website on which streets in Minsk and why have to be renamed. So we did this long piece for the website, but which had all the components for being reformatted for other platforms. So for the website, you would have expert opinion explaining how the streets were named like that. And then there were big pieces on each street of who is the street named after and why it's not a good idea, and maybe some suggestions of how to rename those kind of streets. So it would be a very long piece, unreadable for any other platform. But in this piece, we also had info cards. We also had photos, and then for the Instagram, we created a carousel with a photo, very recognizable for Minskers, photo of the street, quick explainer, who is it named after, why it's wrong. And so you do this carousel, and it's perfect. Then for TikTok, we did the cards with the photos of the people, historical figures who the streets are named after, with, again, explaining why those streets should be renamed. And I can just tell you that, so on the website, it got like about 20,000 views, quite a few comments. Then on Instagram, it was about 20,000 with just this carousel one. And on TikTok, it was almost 200,000. And so you have one story which thought through in a way that you can easily adapt it for other platforms, native for the users, understandable formats, and then you generate a much higher reach than you would do otherwise.
What sort of general response has your work gotten from the audiences? You've talked about this particular story and how well it's done on the different platforms in which you're present. But what's the response been, especially through all of these changes that you've experienced?
Well, I mean, we do have very good connection with the audience. We crowdsource a lot. We often engage with our audiences, asking them questions so that they either help us to find the right people to feature or the right new angles of the stories or even new topics. Sometimes it's really, really touching when we ran a story of a former political prisoner, girl who was sentenced to several months in prison, and she's an artist. And after she came out of the prison, she created a 3D model of the cell. And because there is no information in public space how prisons are actually working from inside, but there are lots of stories of how inhuman conditions were created there for political prisoners. So she created this 3D model of the cell where she was kept. And it gave an idea to all of us how, what's inside, how it looks, and just you can immerse yourself there almost and feel how small it is and overcrowded. And then we got contacted by another political prisoner who was working on a similar project, and he asked us to put in touch with her so that they could work together and create a bigger project. So this kind of feedback, this kind of impact just really motivates you to keep doing what you're doing.
But I also just wanted to ask you could very well end up on the other side of the equation. You could become a political prisoner yourself. Your colleagues could become political prisoners. What does that mean for planning cycles for your institution? How far ahead in the future can you think? 2 years? 3 years?
Well, even 2 years is a luxury. And I would say the horizon now is 1 year. And it's also a constant race because we are not a media institution which has some funding coming from with a budget. It's basically project-based. I have to, that's my job, to make sure that I can provide for the team, and also that this can be managed by other people if something happens to me.
So there might be no one-fits-all solution for public interest media outlets in autocratic countries like Belarus, but maybe you can name 3 best practice tips as to how media in these countries could survive.
I would say that you have to diversify your content, diversify your platforms, diversify your channels of distribution. You also have to experiment and innovate. We, in the media, especially in our countries, even more, because what worked yesterday will not work tomorrow. So you actually have to try to look into the future today and to find the way how and what you will do tomorrow. But the third component is, I think it's crucial. I probably should have started with it: solidarity and openness and support of each other. And that's, I think, what makes Belarusian independent sector so resilient, despite 20 years of repression and suppression. But we were always, all of us, very open about learning from each other, providing assistance to each other, organizing ourselves to help in different ways, depending on what period of time we are talking. But this notion of solidarity and unity is extremely, extremely important for the media operating in authoritarian regimes.
Now, earlier you outlined your vision. How do you know when you've succeeded?
When Belarus is free.
Iryna Vidanava, founder and CEO of CityDog, thank you so much for all your time today. We really enjoyed hearing from you.
Thanks for listening to Survive and Thrive, the Media Viability Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and make sure to hit like so that other listeners can find us as well. For feedback, send an email to dw-academy.surviveandthrive@dw.com. You can find all the information in the show notes.